My dad passed away 6 months ago, and I just found his disturbing deathbed confession. I want to tell my sister, but it would break her heart. My dad passed away 6 months ago after a brutal battle with cancer. He got diagnosed only 8 months after my mother died, and I truly believe losing her is what killed him. Watching him in those final months was painful, because it was like his soul had already left with her. That's why what I found makes absolutely no sense to me. You see, my parents had what everyone called a fairy tale marriage. They were the couple that made single people believe in love and made married people feel like they were doing something wrong. Even after 35 years together, they held hands everywhere they went. My dad would surprise my mom with flowers every Friday without fail. He learned to cook her favorite Nigerian dishes because she missed her grandmother's cooking. He wrote her a poem every anniversary, and I mean every single one. My mom kept them all in a wooden box she treated like treasure. My sister Elena was obsessed with their relationship. She used to tell her friends that she would rather be alone forever than settle for a man who loved her any less than our dad loved our mom. She measured every boyfriend against him, and none of them ever came close. Our dad was a big man, 6'5" and built like he could crush you, but I never once heard him raise his voice at our mother. The only time I ever saw him get aggressive was when some guy at a grocery store made a comment about my mom's accent. My dad grabbed him by the collar and told him if he ever disrespected his wife again, he would put him through the wall. The guy apologized immediately. That was my dad. Gentle as anything, until someone messed with his family. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning out my parents' house because Elena couldn't bring herself to do it. I was going through my dad's desk when I found an envelope taped to the bottom of a drawer. It had no name on it, just the words, "For whoever finds this," in my dad's handwriting. I opened it, and my entire world collapsed. The letter explained everything and nothing at the same time. My dad wrote that when he first met my mother, he felt nothing for her. She was a young woman who had just immigrated from Nigeria and was working at the same factory as him. She noticed him immediately and would find excuses to talk to him. He said he found her kind, but that was it. Over time, they became friends and he learned about her past. She had grown up in extreme poverty, lost most of her family young, and came to this country completely alone with nothing but hope. Despite all that trauma, she was the most generous and loving person he had ever encountered. She would give her lunch to coworkers who forgot theirs. She would stay late to help others finish their work. She slowly fell in love with my dad, and he realized she looked at him like he was her entire world. He wrote that about 2 years into their relationship, he came to a painful conclusion. He cared for her deeply, but he knew he would never love her the way she loved him. He said he thought about it for months and made a decision that would define his entire life. He decided that her happiness mattered more than his own. He chose to spend his life making her feel like the most loved woman on earth, even though his feelings never fully matched hers. Every flower, every poem, every romantic gesture was real in effort, but not completely real in emotion. He said he never cheated, never strayed, never even considered it. He committed fully to the role of devoted husband because she deserved that. He wrote that watching her face light up every time he did something romantic made it worth it. She died believing she had experienced a love story most people only dream about, and he said that was his greatest accomplishment. He ended the letter saying he had no regrets. I sat in that room and cried for an hour. I didn't know if I was sad or angry or both. Part of me wanted to hate him for the deception, but how can you hate someone who sacrificed their own happiness for someone else's entire life? Now I'm faced with an impossible choice. Elena is getting married next year to a man she says reminds her of Dad. She talks about wanting a marriage just like our parents had. She has built her entire romantic worldview around their relationship. If I show her this letter, it will destroy everything she believes in. But if I keep it from her, am I just continuing the cycle of lies? I've read that letter probably 50 times now, and I still don't know what the right thing to do is. Last night, Elena called me and said she was going through Mom's things and found the box of anniversary poems. She was crying and saying how beautiful they were, and how she hopes her fiancé writes her things like that someday. I almost told her right then. But something stopped me. What she doesn't know is that I found something else in that desk. Another envelope, still sealed, addressed directly to Elena. I sit in my apartment staring at the sealed envelope addressed to Elena. My hands shake as I realize I'm holding another piece of this impossible puzzle. The weight of Dad's confession letter feels heavier now that I know he wrote something specifically for my sister. I've been carrying both letters in my jacket pocket for 3 weeks, unable to decide what to do with either of them. The paper feels worn from me constantly touching it through the fabric, making sure it's still there. Every time Elena calls or texts, I feel the weight of those letters like they're made of lead instead of paper. I pull them out now and set them on my coffee table, staring at them like they might suddenly give me answers. Dad's handwriting on Elena's envelope looks shakier than on the confession letter, like maybe he wrote hers later when he was sicker. That makes it worse somehow, knowing he used his limited energy to write her something separate. I pick up my phone 3 times to call her, and 3 times I put it back down. What am I supposed to say? Hey sis, I found something that's going to destroy everything you believe about love. I grab a beer from the fridge even though it's only 2 in the afternoon. The apartment feels too quiet and too small at the same time. I turn on the TV just for noise, but I don't even know what's playing. My eyes keep going back to those envelopes on the table. Sleep doesn't come that night as I keep replaying Dad's words about choosing Mom's happiness over his own feelings. I lie in bed staring at the ceiling, watching car headlights move across the walls. I find myself wondering what could possibly be in Elena's letter that Dad felt needed to be separate from his general confession. Did he tell her something different? Did he explain more? Did he apologize? The not knowing is eating me alive almost as much as the knowing. I get up at 3 in the morning and make coffee even though I know the caffeine will make things worse. I sit at my kitchen table and reread Dad's confession letter for probably the 60th time. Every word feels burned into my brain now, but I keep looking for something I missed, some clue about what to do. The sun starts coming up and I realize I haven't slept at all. I call in sick to work because I can't focus on anything except these letters and what they mean for my family. My boss sounds annoyed, but I don't care. I spend hours researching online about arranged marriages, marriages of convenience and one-sided love, trying to find some framework to understand what Dad did. I read articles about people who stayed in loveless marriages and people who married for practical reasons. I read about different cultural attitudes toward love and marriage. Nothing I read makes me feel better about keeping this secret from Elena. Some articles say, honesty is always best, and others say some truths cause more harm than good. One therapist's blog post talks about protective deception and whether it's ever justified. I bookmark it and then close the tab and then open it again. My phone buzzes around 6 that evening. Raphael asks if I want to grab dinner. I text back that I'm having a rough day, and he responds immediately saying he'll bring pizza. Raphael Barton has been my oldest friend since we were kids, growing up 3 houses down from us. He knew my parents almost as well as I did, and always said they gave him hope that real love existed. He shows up 40 minutes later with a large pepperoni and a 6-pack of beer. We sit on my couch, and he asks what's going on. I almost tell him everything, but the words stick in my throat. How do I explain this without showing him the letters? How do I talk about it without betraying Dad's secret? I mumble something about missing my parents and struggling with the estate stuff. Raphael nods like he understands, but I can tell he knows there's more. He doesn't push, though, which is why we've been friends for so long. He just hands me another slice of pizza and turns on a basketball game. Raphael mentions that he's been thinking about my parents a lot lately because his own marriage is struggling and he wishes he knew their secret. The irony makes me feel physically sick, and I have to excuse myself to the bathroom where I splash cold water on my face. I stare at myself in the mirror and barely recognize the person looking back. When I return, I change the subject to sports, and we don't talk about my parents again. He leaves around 10 and hugs me at the door, telling me to call if I need anything. I lock the door behind him and lean against it, feeling like the worst friend in the world. The next day, I drive to the family house to continue sorting through Dad's belongings, a task I've been avoiding since I found the letters. The house feels empty and sad without my parents in it. I stand in Dad's study looking at the desk where he must have written those confessions, wondering how many nights he sat here feeling trapped by his own kindness. The room suddenly feels like it's closing in on me, suffocating with secrets. I open a window, but it doesn't help. I start going through the desk drawers more carefully this time, looking for anything else Dad might have hidden. I find Dad's old day planners going back decades, each one meticulously noting buy flowers for anniversary and write poem and plan surprise dinner. Every romantic gesture was scheduled and documented like business appointments. There are little check marks next to completed items like he was crossing off tasks on a to-do list. The organization of it all makes it feel even more calculated and sad. I flip through planner after planner, seeing the same patterns year after year. Friday flowers, anniversary poems, birthday surprises, all written down in advance like work meetings. Did Mom ever see these planners? Did she know that his romance was scheduled? My phone rings and Elena's name pops up on the screen. I almost don't answer, but I know that will make her worry. Her voice is so excited and happy that I feel like a monster for even considering showing her Dad's letters. She asks if I want to come see the wedding venue she's chosen with Tunde. She describes this beautiful garden space with an arch where they'll say their vows. She wants to use some of Dad's anniversary poems in the ceremony. I feel the letters in my jacket pocket like they're burning through the fabric. I agree to meet them Saturday, buying myself more time to figure out what to do. She thanks me and says she loves me, and hangs up before I can say anything back. I sit in Dad's chair and put my head in my hands. That night, I finally break down and call Judith Arthur, a family therapist whose card the grief counselor gave me months ago. I make an appointment for the next afternoon, desperate for professional guidance on this impossible situation. I don't mention the letters on the phone, but I know I need to talk to someone objective, someone who doesn't know my family and won't be destroyed by the truth. The receptionist's calm voice scheduling the appointment makes me feel slightly better, like maybe there's a way through this that I haven't thought of yet. I spend the rest of the night pacing my apartment, unable to sit still. The session with Judith is harder than I expected, because saying the words out loud makes everything more real. Her office is small and comfortable with soft lighting and tissues on every table. I sit on her couch and pull out Dad's confession letter with shaking hands. I explain about the sealed envelope for Elena and how I don't know what to do. She reads carefully, her expression neutral and professional, taking her time with each paragraph. When she finishes, she sets the letter down gently and looks at me. She asks me what I think my father wanted by writing these letters. The question catches me off guard because I've been so focused on what I should do that I haven't really thought about what Dad wanted. I tell her I don't know, and she nods slowly. She asks me to think about it for our next session. I leave her office feeling exhausted but somehow lighter, like sharing the burden with someone helped even though she didn't give me any answers. I drive home from Judith's office with her question about Dad's intentions sitting heavy in my mind. Why did he write those letters at all if he wanted the secret buried forever? He could have taken it to his grave and none of us would have known any different. The fact that he put it on paper and hid it where someone might eventually find it has to mean something. I pull into my parking spot and sit there for 20 minutes just thinking about what Dad might have wanted from whoever discovered his confession. Maybe Judith is right that some part of him needed the truth known, even if he was too scared to say it out loud while he was alive. The idea shifts something inside me, because it means I'm not betraying him by considering telling Elena. I'm just finishing what he started, but couldn't complete himself. The next morning, I go back to Judith's office for my second session, and she asks me the homework question right away. She wants to know what Elena would want if our positions were switched, and she had found letters about me instead. I open my mouth to answer, and realize I have absolutely no clue what my sister would choose to do. We're close, and we talk about everything, but we've never once discussed whether truth is always better than a comfortable lie. Elena is practical about most things, but she's always been a romantic when it comes to love and marriage. Would she protect me from painful truth? Or would she think I deserve to know reality no matter how much it hurt? Judith watches me struggle with the question and then gives me new homework. She wants me to think about my own values around honesty and protection before our next appointment. She says I can't make this decision based on what Dad wanted or what Elena might want, because ultimately I'm the one who has to live with whatever choice I make. Saturday morning arrives, and I meet Elena and Tundi at the wedding venue they've been excited to show me. The place is this beautiful garden space with stone pathways and flower beds everywhere. Mom would have absolutely loved it here. Elena grabs my hand the second I get out of my car and pulls me toward the back of the property where they've set up the ceremony area. She's talking so fast about her plans that I can barely keep up with what she's saying. She shows me the wooden arch where they'll stand to say their vows, and she mentions wanting to use some of Dad's anniversary poems as part of the ceremony. Maybe have them printed in the program, or have someone read one during the service. I feel both letters in my jacket pocket, and they suddenly feel like they're burning through the fabric straight into my skin. The weight of them is almost physical, and I have to fight the urge to pull them out right there and tell her everything. Elena keeps talking about flowers and decorations, while Tunde hangs back looking at his phone. After a few minutes, he walks over and puts his hand on Elena's shoulder. She stops mid-sentence and smiles at him before going to talk to the venue coordinator about pricing and availability. Tunde turns to me, and his whole face changes to something more serious. He thanks me for being so supportive during all the wedding planning and says it means a lot to Elena that I'm involved. Then he tells me that Elena talks about our parents' marriage all the time, and it's given him a clear picture of the kind of husband he wants to be for her. He says he wants to love her the way Dad loved Mom, with that same devotion and consistency. I manage to smile and congratulate him, while something inside me is screaming. This poor guy is trying to live up to a standard that never actually existed, and I'm the only person who knows the truth. I shake his hand and tell him he's going to be great for Elena, which is true, even if everything else is a lie. They leave after about an hour, and I sit in my car in the parking lot staring at nothing. My hands are on the steering wheel, and I'm gripping it so hard my knuckles turn white. I seriously consider just destroying both letters right now and never telling anyone what I found. I could rip them up and throw the pieces in different trash cans around the city. I could burn them in my kitchen sink. I could make this whole impossible situation disappear in 5 minutes, and nobody would ever have to know. The thought is so tempting that I actually reach into my pocket and pull out Elena's sealed envelope. I hold it in my hands and imagine tearing it in half without ever knowing what Dad wrote to her. But I know I can't do it. I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what was in that letter and whether I made the right choice. The not knowing would eat at me just as much as the knowing eats at me right now. I put the envelope back in my pocket and start my car. I drive across town to the old factory where Dad worked for 30 years before he retired. The building has been converted into artist studios and small businesses now, but the basic structure is still the same. I park on the street and walk around the outside trying to imagine this place 40 years ago when it was still running. This is where Dad and Mom met. This boring brick building on an ordinary street corner is where their whole story started. Mom fell in love here while Dad felt nothing special. She worked up the courage to talk to him in this building. She probably walked through that door right there hundreds of times hoping to run into him. The ordinariness of the setting makes the whole story feel even sadder somehow. There's nothing romantic or special about this place. It's just a building where people used to make things, and now it's something else. On impulse, I walk inside and look at the directory on the wall. There are pottery studios and photography businesses, and a place that makes custom furniture. I pick one at random and walk down the hallway until I find a pottery studio with the door propped open. An older woman is working at a wheel in the corner, and she looks up when I knock on the door frame. I ask if she's been here long, and if she remembers when this was still a factory. Her whole face lights up, and she wipes clay off her hands before coming over to shake mine. Her name is Lara, and she says she worked at the factory in the 80s before it closed down. I tell her my parents worked here too, and I give their names. She gets this huge smile and immediately starts talking about what a beautiful love story they had. Lara tells me that everyone at the factory knew my mom had a crush on my dad. She says mom would find any excuse to be near him and would light up whenever he walked into a room. All the other workers thought it was sweet how patient mom was and how she never pushed too hard. Lara says that eventually dad seemed to return mom's feelings, and they became the factory's favorite couple. Everyone was so happy when they started dating officially. I ask if dad seemed happy back then, and Lara pauses for a second before answering. She says he always seemed content and steady, maybe not passionate or head over heels, but kind and reliable. She describes him as someone who was good to my mom and treated her well, even if he wasn't the type to make big romantic gestures at work. Her description of dad as content instead of in love hits me like a punch to the stomach. That one word feels like confirmation that his confession letter was completely true. He was content. Not in love, not passionate, just content to be with someone who adored him. I thank Lara for her time and get out of there as fast as I can before she notices how upset I am. I make it to my car and sit there with my head on the steering wheel trying to breathe normally. The validation that Dad's letter was accurate somehow makes everything worse instead of better. Part of me was still hoping that maybe he'd been too hard on himself, or maybe his feelings had been stronger than he realized. But no. Lara's memory matches his confession perfectly. That evening I have to go to Elena's bridal shower at her friend's house across town. I'm the only man there except for Tunda's dad Amos, who Elena invited because she's gotten close with Tunda's whole family. The house is full of women laughing and drinking wine and celebrating love and marriage. There are decorations everywhere with hearts and wedding bells and signs that say things like, "She found her forever," and "Love wins." I stand in the corner holding a beer and trying to look happy while everyone keeps making toasts. Every single toast is about finding true love and having a marriage as beautiful as Elena's parents had. One woman actually says she wants to find a man who looks at her the way our dad looked at our mom. Another one says she's been to 100 weddings, but she's never seen a love story as perfect as what our parents had. I want to scream at all of them that they're celebrating a lie, but instead, I just smile and nod and drink my beer. Amos corners me in the kitchen while I'm refilling drinks and mentions that he's noticed I seem troubled lately. He's a quiet man, maybe 60 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes that remind me of my dad somehow. He moved here from Nigeria about 30 years ago, and there's something about his gentle concern that makes me want to confide in him. I tell him I'm just missing my parents, which is true, but not the whole truth. He nods slowly and puts his hand on my shoulder. He says he lost his own parents years ago and knows that grief comes in waves. We stand there for a minute in silence, and I feel the weight of Dad's letters in my jacket pocket like they're made of lead. Amos asks if I want to talk about anything, and I almost say yes, but then Elena calls for me from the living room and the moment passes. I thank him for checking on me and head back to the party with fresh drinks. He shares that his own marriage to Kira started as an arrangement between families, but grew into genuine love over time. He says sometimes love is a choice you make every day, rather than a feeling you fall into. His words echo Dad's letter so closely that I feel chills run down my spine. I wonder if this kind of practical approach to marriage is more common than I realized, especially among people who came from different cultures. Amos tells me that when he first married Kira, he felt respect for her but not much else. Over the years, though, choosing to be kind to her every day and watching her do the same for him built something stronger than any instant attraction could have. He says their marriage now is built on trust and commitment, and that feels more real than anything based purely on feelings. I listen to him talk and realize that maybe Dad wasn't as unusual as I thought. Maybe there are lots of marriages built on choice instead of passion. The idea should comfort me, but it doesn't because Elena still believes in the fairy tale version. The next week, I meet with Judith again and tell her about my conversations with Lara and Amos. She asks if learning that Dad's confession appears to be true changes how I feel about showing Elena the letters. I admit that it makes me want to protect her even more because now I know she'll be destroying a real memory, not just questioning it. Judith leans forward in her chair and asks me to explain what I mean by that. I tell her that when I first found the letters, I hoped maybe Dad had been too hard on himself or misremembered his feelings. But now I've talked to people who knew him back then, and they all describe him the same way. Content. Steady. Kind. Never passionate or head over heels. The confirmation makes it worse because it means the fairy tale really was fake. Judith writes something in her notebook and then looks up at me. She asks if learning that Dad's confession appears to be true changes how I feel about showing Elena the letters. I realize I'm going in circles and feel frustrated with myself. Judith challenges me on whether protecting Elena from truth is actually protection or just control. She asks if I'm really trying to spare Elena pain, or if I'm trying to spare myself the pain of watching her hurt. The question makes me angry at first, and I tell her that of course I'm trying to protect Elena. But she doesn't back down. She points out that I've been carrying these letters for weeks, and I've talked to multiple people about them, but I still haven't told my own sister. She suggests that maybe I'm more worried about how Elena will react to me than to the information itself. I want to argue, but I know she's right that my motivations are mixed. Part of me is terrified that Elena will blame me for ruining her memories or for keeping the secret so long. Another part worries she'll hate Dad, and I'll lose the version of him I grew up with, too. Judith asks what would happen if I just destroyed the letters and never told anyone. I admit I've thought about it constantly, but I can't do it because I'd always wonder what was in Elena's letter. I schedule another session for the following week, but I leave feeling more confused than when I arrived. That night I have dinner with Elena and Tunde at their apartment across town. Their place is small but cozy, with wedding magazines stacked on the coffee table and paint samples taped to the walls. Elena shows me the wedding invitations that just arrived, and they're beautiful with gold lettering on cream paper. She opens one and shows me that they quoted one of Dad's anniversary poems inside. The poem talks about love at first sight, and knowing immediately she was the one. I read the words and feel sick, because I know now that it was a beautiful lie. Elena is so excited about the invitations, and keeps talking about how romantic the poem is. She says she wants everyone at the wedding to know that true love exists because our parents proved it. I force myself to smile and tell her the invitations look great. Tunde mentions that his parents' marriage started as an arrangement, and asks if I think love that grows slowly is less valid than instant attraction. Elena jumps in before I can answer, and says that our parents proved instant connection is the real deal. She talks about how Dad saw Mom at the factory, and just knew she was special. I watch Tunde's face fall slightly, and I realize that Elena's version of events is completely wrong. Dad didn't see Mom and just know anything. He saw her, and felt nothing special at all. Elena keeps going on about fate and destiny, and how some people are just meant to be together. I realize that Elena's idealization of our parents might actually be hurting her relationship with Tunde. He looks uncomfortable, and changes the subject to ask about dessert. After dinner, I pull Tunde aside while Elena is in the kitchen getting coffee. I tell him that all marriages are different, and what matters is commitment and kindness, not how the feelings started. He looks relieved and admits that sometimes he feels like he can't live up to Elena's expectations based on our dad. He says Elena talks about our parents constantly, and compares everything in their relationship to what our parents had. He loves Elena deeply, but he's worried that he'll never be romantic enough or devoted enough to match the standard she set. I tell him that he shouldn't try to be like Dad, because every relationship is unique. He thanks me, and says it helps to hear that. This conversation plants a seed of urgency in my mind about the damage Elena's idealization might be causing. She's not just living with a false memory. She's actively using that false memory to judge her real relationship and finding it lacking. Tunde is a good man who genuinely loves her, but he's competing with a ghost that never existed. I realize that keeping Dad's secret might actually be hurting Elena more than telling her would. I call Judith the next morning and tell her I think I need to tell Elena something. She asks what changed, and I explain about dinner with Elena and Tunde. I tell her that Elena's idealized view is damaging her real relationship because she keeps comparing Tunde to a version of Dad that was manufactured. Judith asks if I've decided to show Elena the letters, and I admit I'm still not sure. Maybe I could just gently challenge her idealized view without showing her the actual proof. Judith asks what I'm most afraid of, and I realize it's not just Elena's pain, but the possibility that she'll hate Dad, or worse, hate me for telling her. I tell Judith that I'm scared Elena will think I'm destroying our family's history out of spite or jealousy. What if she doesn't believe me and thinks I'm making it up? What if she reads the letters and decides Dad was a monster instead of understanding the complexity? Judith points out that I can't control how Elena reacts, and that trying to manage her emotions is another form of control. She says I need to decide what I believe is right, and then let Elena have her own response. The session ends with me feeling more certain that I need to tell Elena, but still terrified of how to do it. That weekend, I visit the church where my parents got married. It's a small brick building with a white steeple and flower beds out front. I ask to speak with the pastor who officiated their ceremony, and the secretary tells me he's retired but still comes in on Saturdays. She calls him and he agrees to meet me in his old office. Pastor Williams is in his 70s now with white hair and a warm smile. He remembers my parents clearly and talks about how devoted Dad seemed to Mom. He says Dad was always respectful and attentive during their pre-marriage counseling sessions. I ask if he ever had doubts about their marriage, and he pauses before answering. He admits that Dad seemed more dutiful than passionate, but he figured some people just express love quietly. He says Dad never missed a single counseling session and always spoke kindly about Mom even when they discussed difficult topics. The pastor tells me that in his experience, the quiet, steady love often lasts longer than the passionate fireworks kind. I ask what he means, and he explains that passion fades, but duty and commitment can grow stronger over time. The pastor shares that he's seen many kinds of successful marriages in his decades of ministry. He's seen couples who fell madly in love at first sight, and couples who barely knew each other when they got married. The passionate ones aren't always the ones that last, he says. Some of the most passionate couples he married got divorced within a few years when the excitement wore off. Meanwhile, some of the arranged marriages or practical partnerships he's seen have grown into deep bonds that lasted 50 years or more. He says commitment and choice can be just as powerful as feeling, maybe more so because they don't fade when things get hard. His perspective is kind, but it doesn't make my decision any easier. I thank him for his time and drive home thinking about everything he said. Part of me wants to believe that Dad's choice to commit to Mom was just as valid as passionate love would have been. But another part of me knows that Mom deserved to be with someone who felt about her the way she felt about them. I park in my driveway and sit there for 10 minutes trying to figure out what I'm going to do about Elena and these letters that are burning a hole in my pocket. I go through work like a zombie for the next few days. My boss stops by my desk on Wednesday and asks if I'm doing okay. She mentions that she noticed I've been staring at my computer screen without typing for long stretches. I tell her I'm fine, just tired. She offers me more bereavement time if I need it. I shake my head and say I'd rather stay busy. The truth hits me as I'm saying it. The real grief is just starting now that I know what Dad's marriage actually was. Before I found those letters, I was mourning the loss of my parents. Now I'm mourning the loss of what I thought their relationship meant. My phone buzzes during a meeting on Thursday. Elena sent me a photo of Mom's wooden box sitting open on her coffee table. The anniversary poems are spread out around it like treasures. Her text says she's been reading one every night before bed for inspiration. She writes that they make her feel close to Mom and give her confidence about her own marriage. She adds 3 heart emojis. I excuse myself from the meeting and lock myself in a bathroom stall. My hands shake as I stare at that photo. Those poems aren't love letters. They're Dad's way of paying penance for feelings he didn't have. Every beautiful word was an apology for not loving her the way she deserved. I feel sick to my stomach and have to sit there for 10 minutes before I can go back to the meeting. Saturday morning, I drive to the cemetery where both my parents are buried. Their graves are side by side under a big oak tree. Mom's headstone has a quote from one of Dad's poems carved into it. Elena picked it out. The quote says something about eternal love and souls intertwined forever. I stand between the 2 graves trying to figure out what they would want me to do. Dad's letter makes it clear he wanted the truth hidden. He went to great lengths to tape that envelope under a drawer where nobody would find it easily. But then why write it down at all? Why not just take the secret to his grave? I look at Mom's headstone and try to imagine how she would have felt if she'd known the truth while she was alive. Would it have destroyed her? Would she have stayed with him anyway? The thought of her spending 35 years with someone who was pretending makes my chest hurt. A woman's voice interrupts my thoughts. She's standing a few graves over holding flowers. She asks if I'm okay. I wipe my eyes quickly and tell her I'm just missing my parents. She nods like she understands and says she's sorry for my loss. Then she does something unexpected. She tells me she recently found out her late husband had been keeping a major secret from her for their entire marriage. She doesn't say what the secret was. She just says that part of her wishes she never found out, because the truth changed how she remembered their whole life together. But another part of her is grateful, because it finally explained things that never quite made sense. Little moments and reactions that seemed odd at the time suddenly clicked into place. She says she's still figuring out how she feels about it. Her words stick with me long after she walks away. That night I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what that woman said about things making sense. Around 3 in the morning, I finally drift off and have the most vivid dream. Mom is alive and sitting at our kitchen table. She's wearing the blue dress she loved and her hair is pulled back the way she always wore it. She asks me why I look so sad. In the dream, I try to tell her about Dad's letter, but when I open my mouth, no words come out. I try again and again, but nothing happens. Mom just smiles at me with this knowing look on her face. She reaches across the table and pats my hand. Then she says something that makes my blood run cold. She says she always knew. I wake up gasping and covered in sweat. The clock says 4:30. I spend the rest of the night lying awake wondering if that dream means something. Did Mom know on some level? Did she figure it out and choose to accept it because she loved him anyway? Or is my brain just trying to make me feel better about the whole situation? The next morning, I call Raphael before I can talk myself out of it. I tell him I need to see him right away because I'm losing my mind. He says he can meet me at the coffee shop near his apartment in an hour. I show up early and order 2 coffees even though my hands are already shaking from lack of sleep. Raphael walks in looking concerned. He sits down across from me and asks what's going on. I pull out Dad's confession letter from my jacket pocket. The paper is getting worn from how many times I've folded and unfolded it. I slide it across the table without saying anything. Raphael picks it up and starts reading. I watch his face go through the same journey mine did. First confusion, then disbelief, then this awful understanding. He reads the whole thing twice before he looks up at me. His eyes are wet. Raphael asks if I've told Elena yet. When I say no, he immediately tells me I shouldn't. He says some truths do more harm than good. He argues that Elena's entire sense of self is built on the foundation of our parents' marriage. If I destroy that foundation, I destroy her. He says she's happy right now planning her wedding and believing in love. Why would I take that away from her? I ask him if he'd want to know if it were his parents. He stares at his coffee for a long time before admitting he doesn't know. He says, maybe ignorance really is bliss sometimes. The conversation makes me feel worse instead of better, because now I know even my best friend thinks I should lie to my sister. We end up talking for 3 hours. We go in circles about truth and lies and protection and love. Raphael keeps coming back to the idea that Dad made his choice and lived with it his whole life. He argues that telling Elena now would be disrespecting Dad's wishes. I point out that Dad also wrote the letter down, which suggests part of him wanted someone to know. Raphael says maybe Dad just needed to confess to someone, even if that someone was a piece of paper. Around noon, Raphael finally says that whatever I decide, he'll support me. But he makes me promise to really think about what Dad would actually want, not what I think is morally right. He says those aren't always the same thing. I promise him I'll think about it. We hug in the parking lot, and I drive home feeling more lost than before. I spend the afternoon rereading Dad's confession letter for probably the 100th time. I'm looking for any clue about what he wanted me to do with this information. The phrase, "for whoever finds this," keeps jumping out at me. It suggests he knew someone might find it eventually. But the hidden location under the drawer suggests he hoped nobody would. The whole thing is so contradictory it makes my head hurt. Did he want us to know or not? Was the letter insurance in case he needed to explain himself someday? Or was it just a way for him to process his own feelings? I read each sentence over and over trying to decode some hidden message, but there's nothing. It's just Dad being honest about something he could never be honest about while alive. My phone rings around 7 that evening. Elena's name flashes on the screen. I almost don't answer because I'm not ready to talk to her yet, but I know if I don't pick up, she'll worry. I answer and try to sound normal. Elena asks if I'll give a speech at her wedding about our parents' marriage and what it taught me about love. The request feels like the universe is testing me, like everything has been building to this exact moment. She says she wants me to talk about how Dad loved Mom and what that kind of devotion looks like. She wants me to inspire the guests with their love story. I tell her. There's a long pause on the other end. Elena sounds hurt when she asks why I didn't immediately say yes. She reminds me that I'm her only brother, and this is important to her. I scramble for an excuse and say, I just want to make sure I have time to write something good. She accepts this, but I can hear the disappointment in her voice. We talk for a few more minutes about wedding details, but the whole time I feel the distance growing between us. When we hang up, I sit in the dark, wondering how much longer I can keep this secret before it destroys our relationship anyway. I schedule another session with Judith for the following week. The appointment arrives faster than I want it to. I sit in her office with the letters in my jacket pocket, feeling the weight of them like they're made of lead instead of paper. Judith asks how I've been since our last session, and I tell her about Elena's request for the wedding speech. She leans forward in her chair and asks what I would say if I agreed to do it. The question hits me harder than I expect, because I realize I have no idea how to talk about my parents' marriage anymore. Everything I thought I knew feels wrong now. The stories I would have told about their devotion and romance all feel contaminated by Dad's confession. I try to explain this to Judith, but the words come out jumbled and frustrated. She nods and writes something in her notebook before looking up at me with this calm expression. She says that maybe the truth isn't that Dad didn't love Mom, but that he loved her differently than she loved him. The statement makes me stop and actually think instead of just spiraling. Judith continues by proposing that Dad's choice to commit fully, despite not feeling instant passion, might actually be a deeper form of love than the fairy tale version. She says choosing someone every single day for 35 years takes more strength than just riding a wave of emotion. The reframing shifts something in me, though I'm not sure if it's enough to change my decision about telling Elena. I leave the session feeling slightly less like I'm drowning, but still completely lost about what to do next. The weekend arrives and I force myself to go back to my parents' house to continue sorting through Dad's things. I've been avoiding it since I found the letters, but I know I need to finish the job. I'm going through a box of his old notebooks when I find a journal from the year he met Mom. The cover is worn and the pages smell like dust and time. I open it carefully and start reading the entries. They're sparse and practical, mostly about work schedules and bills he needed to pay. There are occasional mentions of Mom, but they're brief and factual. Had lunch with a Nigerian woman from the assembly line. She's very kind. She helped me fix a machine today. She brought me soup when I had a cold. There's no romance in his words, but there's genuine respect, and what looks like growing fondness. I keep reading through the months and watch their relationship develop in these small notes. The entries get slightly longer when he writes about her. She told me about her family today. She's been through so much. She stays late to help others even when she's tired. She gave her lunch to someone who forgot theirs again. I can see Dad recognizing Mom's goodness, even if he wasn't feeling the lightning bolt of love she felt for him. I flip ahead several months and find entries that show Dad actively choosing to pursue a relationship with Mom. One entry says she deserves someone who will treat her well, and I can be that person for her. Another says she looks at me like I'm everything, and maybe that's enough. The journal confirms his confession letter, but it also shows this wasn't a cold calculation. He genuinely cared about her happiness, even if he wasn't swept away by passion. There's one entry near the end of the journal that makes me stop breathing for a second. Dad wrote, "I asked her to marry me today, and she cried with joy. I hope I can make her this happy for the rest of her life. I will try every day." The words are simple, but they carry so much weight. This was Dad making a promise to himself and to Mom, deciding that her happiness would be his life's work. I sit on the floor of his study with the journal in my lap and cry for the second time since finding these secrets. But this time the tears feel different, less angry and more sad for both of my parents in different ways. I bring the journal to my next session with Judith and show her the entries. We spend the hour discussing how Dad's version of love might have been just as real as Mom's, just expressed differently. Judith points out that many people confuse the initial rush of attraction with love when real love is actually what Dad did, the daily choice to show up and care for someone. I want to believe this, but I keep getting stuck on the idea that Mom deserved to be loved with passion, not just commitment. Judith asks if I think Elena is capable of understanding this nuance, or if she'll only hear Dad didn't love Mom. The question makes me pause because I realize I don't know my sister well enough to predict her reaction. Elena has always seen things in black and white, good or bad, right or wrong. I'm not sure she can handle the gray area that Dad's marriage lived in. I tell Judith this, and she suggests that maybe Elena needs to learn to see the gray areas before she gets married herself. Otherwise, she'll be chasing an impossible standard that doesn't exist. The session ends with me feeling even more pressure to tell Elena the truth, not just for honesty's sake, but to actually help her marriage to Tundi succeed. That night, my phone rings around 8, and Tundi's name flashes on the screen. I almost don't answer because I'm exhausted from the therapy session, but something makes me pick up. He asks if we can talk privately, and there's something in his voice that sounds urgent. We agree to meet at a bar downtown in 30 minutes. I arrive first and order a beer I don't really want, just to have something to do with my hands. Tundi shows up looking stressed and tired. He orders a whiskey, and we sit in a booth in the back where it's quiet. He starts talking before I can even ask what's wrong. He confesses that he's worried Elena's expectations for their marriage are unrealistic. He says she constantly compares their relationship to our parents, and he's afraid he'll never measure up. She talks about how Dad always knew the right thing to say and do, how he surprised Mom with romantic gestures constantly, how their love never faded even after decades. Tundi says he loves Elena deeply, but he's not naturally romantic like that, and he's terrified she'll be disappointed in him. I realize while he's talking that my silence about Dad's letters is actively hurting Elena's present relationship, not just potentially hurting her past. She's using a false standard to judge Tunde, and it's putting pressure on both of them. I take a long drink of my beer and decide to test the waters. I ask Tunde how he would feel if he learned that our parents' marriage wasn't exactly what it seemed. His face changes immediately, and he looks relieved instead of concerned. No, he says it would actually help because then Elena might stop using them as an impossible standard. He admits that he's been feeling inadequate for months because he can't compete with a perfect memory. His response makes me realize that the truth might actually help Elena's marriage rather than hurt it. If she understands that Dad's love was built through choice and daily effort rather than natural passion, maybe she'll appreciate Tunde's gradual growing love instead of seeing it as a failure. We talk for another hour about marriage and expectations and what love really means. Tunde shares that his parents had an arranged marriage that grew into something beautiful over time, and he always thought that was just as valid as love at first sight until he met Elena. Now he feels like his version of love isn't good enough. I tell Tunde. He thanks me and says he hopes whatever I'm considering will help. He mentions that he loves Elena deeply, but their love is growing gradually, not the instant fireworks she seems to expect based on our parents. I see so much of Dad in Tunde's words that it's almost eerie. They're both good men who are choosing to love someone fully, even though the initial spark wasn't overwhelming. The parallel makes me wonder if this pattern is more common than anyone admits. Maybe the fairy tale version of love is actually rare, and most successful marriages are built on what Dad and Tunde are doing, the daily choice to show up and care. I drive home that night knowing I need to make a decision soon before Elena's idealization damages her relationship beyond repair. The next day, I make a decision that I know crosses a line, but I can't stop myself. I take the sealed envelope addressed to Elena and hold it over a pot of boiling water, using the steam to carefully loosen the glue. My hands shake as I work because I know this is a violation of Dad's intentions and Elena's privacy. But I tell myself I need to know what's in it before I can decide whether to show her anything. The envelope finally opens and I pull out the letter inside with trembling fingers. I unfold it slowly, almost afraid of what I'm going to read. Dad's handwriting covers a single page, smaller and more cramped than his confession letter, like he was trying to fit everything into limited space. Dad's letter to Elena is shorter than his confession, but somehow more devastating. He writes that he sees how she's idealized his marriage to Mom, and he worries it's setting her up for disappointment. He explains that real love is built through choice and commitment, not just feeling, and he hopes she'll judge her own relationships by their kindness rather than their passion. He tells her that he chose to love Mom every single day, even when it was hard, even when the feelings weren't overwhelming, because that's what real devotion looks like. He writes that if she's reading this letter, then someone found his confession, and he wants her to understand that his love for Mom was genuine, even if it wasn't the fairy tale she imagines. He ends by saying he's proud of the woman she's become, and he trusts her to understand that love is more complicated and more beautiful than the stories make it seem. I read the letter 3 times, and each time it hits me harder. Dad knew Elena needed to hear this truth, and he was too afraid to tell her while he was alive, so he left the decision to whoever found the letters. The responsibility feels crushing, but also clarifying, because now I know exactly what I need to do. I spend the rest of the morning going back and forth between the 2 letters, reading them until the words blur together. Dad's confession letter talks about duty and choice and making Mom happy. Elena's letter talks about those same things but frames them differently. He writes that choosing to love someone every single day is more powerful than just feeling love automatically. He says that real marriage isn't about constant butterflies and fireworks. It's about waking up and deciding to be kind even when you're tired. It's about learning someone's favorite tea and making it without being asked. It's about holding their hand when they're scared, even if you're scared too. He tells Elena that if she's reading this, then someone found his other confession. Probably me, since I was always the one who couldn't leave things alone. He writes that he wants her to know his love for Mom was real, even if it started differently than she imagines. He says he chose Mom every morning for 35 years, and that choice became love in a way that felt just as true as any fairy tale. The letter ends with him saying he's proud of the woman Elena has become, and he knows she's smart enough to understand that love is more complicated than the movies make it seem. He writes that he trusts her to build her own marriage based on reality instead of fantasy, and he hopes she finds someone who chooses her the way he chose Mom. Reading his words makes my chest tight because he basically handed me permission to destroy Elena's entire worldview while also asking me to help her build something better. The responsibility of that feels impossible. I fold both letters carefully and put them back in their envelopes. Then I walk to my bathroom and sit down on the cold tile floor. The tears come hard and fast, the kind that make your whole body shake. I cry for Dad, who spent his whole life playing a role even though it was a kind role. I cry for Mom, who never knew the truth but died happy. I cry for Elena, who's about to have her foundation ripped away. I cry for myself because I have to be the one to do it. After about 20 minutes, I wash my face and look at myself in the mirror. My eyes are red and swollen, but I feel clearer than I have in weeks. Dad gave me permission to tell Elena the truth because he knew she needed to hear it. He was too scared to tell her while he was alive, so he left the decision to whoever found the letters. It's a coward's way out, but it's also weirdly brave because he knew the truth might come out, and he prepared for it. I dry my face and walk back to the living room where both letters sit on my coffee table. For the first time since finding them, I know exactly what I need to do. I need to show Elena both letters together so she understands the full picture of what Dad was trying to say. I need to do it soon before her wedding planning goes any further, and before she builds even more of her life around a lie. Over the next 2 days, I barely sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I imagine different versions of how the conversation with Elena will go. In some versions, she understands immediately, and thanks me for being honest. In other versions, she screams at me and tells me I've ruined everything. In the worst versions, she stops speaking to me entirely, and I lose my sister along with my parents. I rehearse what I'll say over and over in my head. I'll start by telling her I found something in Dad's desk that I need to share with her. I'll explain that it's complicated and difficult but important. I'll hand her the confession letter first and let her read it all the way through before saying anything. Then I'll give her the letter addressed to her and let Dad's own words explain what he meant. Every version of this conversation feels wrong. There's no good way to tell someone that their entire understanding of their parents' marriage was based on a performance. There's no gentle way to say that the love story they've used as a blueprint for their own life wasn't quite what it seemed. I keep thinking about Elena's face when she talks about Mom and Dad. The way she lights up when she tells stories about their anniversary trips, or the time Dad surprised Mom with tickets to see her favorite singer. All those memories are real, but now they'll be colored by this new information. She'll look back at every romantic gesture and wonder if Dad was just going through the motions. I spend hours trying to find the right words, but everything sounds either too harsh or too soft. If I'm too blunt, I'll hurt her unnecessarily. If I'm too gentle, she might not understand the full truth. I need to find a balance between honesty and kindness, which is basically what Dad spent his whole marriage doing. By Wednesday afternoon, I can't take the waiting anymore. I pick up my phone and call Elena before I can talk myself out of it. She answers on the 3rd ring, sounding happy and relaxed. I tell her I need to talk to her about something important involving Mom and Dad. Her voice immediately shifts to concern, and she asks if something's wrong with the estate or if there's a problem with the house. I tell her it's nothing like that, but I really need to see her in person this weekend if she's available. She asks if I can just tell her over the phone, but I insist it needs to be face-to-face. After a pause, she agrees to come to my apartment Saturday morning around 10. She says Tunde has a work thing anyway, so the timing works out. I thank her and we hang up. My hands are shaking as I set the phone down. I just committed to destroying my sister's worldview in 3 days. Thursday and Friday drag by like I'm moving through mud. I can't focus on anything at work, and I keep rereading both letters even though I have them memorized by now. Part of me hopes I'll find some hidden meaning that makes this easier, but the words stay the same no matter how many times I look at them. Thursday night, Raphael calls to check on me because I've been radio silent for days. I tell him I'm planning to tell Elena everything on Saturday. He goes quiet for a minute, then asks if I'm sure that's the right move. I explain about Elena's letter from Dad and how it basically gave me permission to share the truth. Raphael says he'll keep his phone on all weekend in case I need him. His support means more than I can express. Friday morning, I wake up with my stomach in knots. I call in sick to work because there's no way I can pretend to care about spreadsheets and meetings when I'm about to blow up my sister's life. I spend the day cleaning my apartment obsessively because I need something to do with my hands. I vacuum every room twice. I scrub the bathroom until it shines. I organize my bookshelf by color, then by author, then by size. None of it helps the anxiety sitting in my chest like a stone. Friday evening, I get a text from Kira asking if I want to come over for dinner. Tunde must have mentioned to his parents that I've been struggling. I almost say no because I don't feel like being social, but then I remember Kira's story about her arranged marriage. Maybe hearing it again will give me confidence that Elena can understand Dad's situation. I text back yes and drive over to their house around 6. Amos and Kira live in a small brick house with a garden that Kira tends obsessively. She greets me at the door with a hug and leads me to their dining room where the table is already set. Amos shakes my hand and asks how I'm holding up. I tell them I've been better, and Kira pats my shoulder gently. Over dinner, they share stories about their early years of marriage. Kira explains that she was 18 when her family arranged her marriage to Amos, who was 23. She had been in love with a boy from her village, but her parents chose Amos because he had a good job and came from a respected family. She admits she cried on her wedding day because she felt like her life was decided for her. Amos adds that he knew Kira didn't want to marry him at first, and it made him feel terrible. He tried his best to be kind and patient while she adjusted to their new life together. Kira says it took almost 2 years before she started to genuinely care for Amos. She would watch him come home tired from work and still help her practice English. She noticed how he always asked about her day and actually listened to her answers. She saw how he sent money to her family back in Nigeria without her having to ask. Slowly, her resentment turned to appreciation and then to real affection. She says that by their 5th anniversary, she loved Amos more deeply than she ever loved the boy from her village. That love grew from respect and daily kindness instead of passion, and it felt more solid because of it. Amos reaches over and squeezes her hand while she talks. He says their marriage taught him that love can be built brick by brick through small acts of care. He mentions that he thinks Western culture puts too much emphasis on falling in love and not enough on choosing to love. Their story gives me hope that Elena might be able to understand what Dad did. If Kira can look back on her arranged marriage and see it as a beautiful love story, then maybe Elena can see Dad's choice as an act of devotion rather than deception. I thank them for sharing and for the dinner. Kira hugs me again at the door and tells me that whatever I'm facing, honesty is usually the kindest choice in the long run. Her words stay with me as I drive home. Saturday morning arrives too fast. I barely slept Friday night and I'm up at 6 even though Elena won't be here until 10. I shower and get dressed, then realize I have 4 hours to kill. I make coffee, but my stomach is too upset to drink it. I pace around my apartment straightening things that are already straight. I check my phone every few minutes even though Elena hasn't texted. At 9:30 I hear a knock on my door and my heart jumps into my throat. I open it to find Elena standing there with 2 coffees from our favorite shop and a bag of pastries. She's early and she looks worried. She hands me one of the coffees and follows me inside. We sit on my couch and she immediately asks what's going on. I can see the concern in her face, and it makes what I'm about to do even harder. I take a deep breath and tell her I found something in Dad's desk a few weeks ago. I explain that it's been weighing on me, and I wasn't sure if I should share it, but I've decided she needs to know. She sets down her coffee and turns to face me fully. I reach into the drawer of my coffee table where I've been keeping the letters and pull out Dad's confession letter. I hand it to her without saying anything else. She takes it carefully and starts to read. I watch her face as she goes through the first paragraph. Her expression shifts from curious to confused. She reads faster as she gets further into the letter. By the time she reaches the part where Dad admits he never fully loved Mom the way Mom loved him, Elena's face has gone pale. She finishes the letter and immediately starts reading it again from the beginning like she's hoping she misunderstood something. The second time through her hands start shaking. She reads it a third time and tears begin rolling down her cheeks. She keeps shaking her head and whispering no over and over. I reach out to touch her shoulder, but she pulls away from me. She looks up at me with devastation in her eyes and asks how long I've known about this. I tell her I found it about 3 weeks ago. She asks why I'm telling her now and why I told anyone else before telling her. I realize she somehow knows I've been talking to other people about this. I admit that I've been struggling with whether to tell her at all. I explain that I talked to Raphael and Judith and even had a conversation with Tunde about marriage and love. The mention of Tunde's name makes her face crumple. She asks if I told her fiancé about this before telling her. I quickly explain that I didn't show Tunde the letter, but I did talk to him about different kinds of love and marriage. I can see that this hurts her even more. She stands up and walks to my window with her back to me. I tell her there's another letter, and I pull out the envelope addressed to her. She turns around and stares at it like it might bite her. I hold it out, and after a long moment, she takes it. She opens the envelope and unfolds the letter inside. This time, I don't watch her face because I can't handle seeing more pain. I hear her breathing change as she reads. When she finishes, she doesn't read it again. She just stands there holding both letters and crying silently. After what feels like an hour, she finally speaks. She asks me if I think Dad really loved Mom, or if their whole marriage was a lie. Her voice breaks on the word lie. I stand up and move closer to her, but I don't touch her because I'm not sure she wants me to. I tell her what Judith said about how there are different kinds of love, and Dad's choice to commit fully was its own form of devotion. I mention what Amos and Kira shared about their arranged marriage and how their love grew from respect and daily kindness. I say that I think Dad's love for Mom was real, even if it wasn't the instant, passionate fairy tale we always imagined. I tell her that Dad chose Mom every single day for 35 years, and that choice meant something important. Elena doesn't say anything for a long time. She walks back to the couch and sits down, still holding both letters in her hands. I sit next to her but leave some space between us because I'm not sure if she wants me close right now. She stares at the letters and then looks up at me with red eyes. She asks if I think what Dad did was wrong. I tell her I've been asking myself that same question for weeks, and I still don't have a clear answer. She nods slowly like she understands the confusion. We sit there in silence for a while, and then she starts talking about Tunde. She says she's been putting so much pressure on him to be exactly like Dad, to write her poems and surprise her with flowers and make grand romantic gestures. She admits that when he doesn't do those things naturally, she gets disappointed and wonders if he really loves her. She says now she realizes she's been comparing him to a standard that wasn't even real. I ask her if she loves Tunde, and she says yes immediately, but then she pauses and says she doesn't know if it's the kind of love she always thought she was supposed to have. She says sometimes their relationship feels comfortable and steady instead of exciting and passionate, and she's been worried that means something is wrong. I tell her what Amos said about his marriage, how it started as an arrangement and grew into real love over time. I mention how Kira talked about choosing to love someone every day instead of just feeling it automatically. Elena listens carefully and then says maybe she's been looking for the wrong thing this whole time. She says part of her feels devastated because the fairy tale she believed in is gone, but another part feels relieved because now she doesn't have to chase something impossible. She asks me if I think Mom knew the truth. I tell her about my dream where Mom seemed to know and accept it. I say I've been wondering the same thing for weeks, whether Mom saw through Dad's efforts and chose to believe in them anyway, or whether she really thought it was all genuine passion. Elena considers this and then says, maybe it doesn't matter because Mom died happy. She says Mom spent 35 years feeling loved and cherished, and that's what counts even if the source of that love was different from she imagined. I agree and say that Dad gave Mom exactly what she needed, even if it cost him something. Elena wipes her eyes and says she's grateful Dad made that choice for Mom because Mom deserved to feel that loved after everything she'd been through. We talk for hours about what all of this means for how we understand our parents and our family. Elena admits she needs to have some serious conversations with Tunde about their relationship and what they both actually want, instead of what she thinks they should want based on Mom and Dad. She says she's been so focused on recreating our parents' marriage that she hasn't been building her own. I tell her I think that's really mature, and I'm proud of her for being willing to look at this honestly. She laughs a little and says she doesn't feel mature. She feels like her whole worldview just got turned upside down. I say maybe that's what growing up actually is. Over the next few weeks, Elena starts seeing a therapist to work through everything. She calls me after her first session and says it was hard but helpful. She tells me the therapist is helping her separate her own feelings and desires from the expectations she built up around our parents' relationship. She has several long conversations with Tunde about what they both want from marriage. She tells me that Tunde admitted he's been feeling inadequate because he's not naturally romantic like Dad was, and now that she knows the full story, she can reassure him that he doesn't need to be. She says their relationship has actually gotten better since she stopped comparing him to an impossible standard. They talk about building their own kind of love, one based on who they actually are, instead of who she thought they should be. Elena tells me she feels like she's finally seeing Tunde clearly, instead of through the filter of our parents' marriage. A few weeks later, Elena calls me and says she's been going through the wedding plans, and she wants to make some changes. She says she still wants to use one of Dad's poems in the ceremony, but she's choosing a different one. Instead of the poem about love at first sight that she originally picked, she's using one about commitment and choosing to love someone every day. She reads it to me over the phone, and it's actually beautiful in a different way now that I know the full context. The poem talks about waking up each morning and deciding to be the best partner you can be, about showing love through actions when feelings aren't enough, about building something real through daily choice. Elena says the poem means even more to her now because she understands what it really took for Dad to write it. I tell her I think that's a perfect choice, and I'm moved by her ability to find meaning in all this complexity. A few days later, Tunde calls me and asks if we can meet for coffee. When we sit down, he thanks me for telling Elena the truth about our parents. He says their relationship has improved dramatically over the past few weeks because Elena stopped holding him to an impossible standard. He tells me they're building their own kind of love now, one based on who they actually are rather than who Elena thought they should be based on Mom and Dad. He says he loves Elena deeply, and he's committed to her, but their love is growing gradually instead of being instant fireworks, and now Elena is okay with that. I tell him I'm relieved that my decision to tell her actually helped instead of hurt their relationship. He says it definitely helped because Elena was starting to resent him for not being more like Dad, and now she understands that Dad's version of love isn't the only valid kind. We talk for a while about marriage and what it really means to commit to someone, and I feel grateful that Tunde is the kind of person who can have these honest conversations. The next weekend, Elena comes over to my apartment and brings Mom's wooden box of anniversary poems. She says she wants to go through them together with our new understanding. We sit on my couch and start reading them one by one. Some of them are clearly Dad working hard to express feelings he didn't naturally have, full of flowery language about eternal passion and soulmates. But others show genuine affection and appreciation that seems to have grown over time. There are poems about Mom's kindness, about her strength, about how she made him want to be a better person. There are poems about shared memories and inside jokes, about the life they built together. Elena points out that the later poems feel more real than the early ones, like Dad's feelings deepened as the years went on, even if they never matched Mom's intensity. We realized that Dad's love for Mom was real, just not the instant fairy tale we always imagined. It was something that grew from respect and choice and daily commitment, and maybe that's its own kind of beautiful, even if it's different from what we thought. We finish going through all the poems, and Elena carefully puts them back in the box. She looks at me and says she thinks we should keep Dad's letters private. She says some truths are just for us to carry, and we don't need to share them with extended family or friends. I ask her if she's sure, and she nods. She says protecting Mom's memory and Dad's reputation matters more than being completely honest with everyone who knew them. She says people loved our parents and believed in their marriage, and there's no reason to take that away from them. I agree and say I think Dad would approve of that decision. We're choosing to protect the story just like Dad chose to create it in the first place. Elena says it feels right to honor what Dad built, even now that we know how he built it. 6 weeks later, I'm standing at Elena's wedding watching her marry Tunde in the garden venue she showed me months ago. The ceremony is beautiful, and when it comes time for my speech, I walk up to the microphone with my heart pounding. I talk about our parents and their marriage, but I talk about it differently than I would have before finding those letters. I focus on Dad's daily choice to show love through actions and commitment. I talk about how real love is built through choosing your partner every day, not just feeling swept away by passion. I say that the strongest marriages are the ones where both people wake up each morning and decide to be devoted partners, where love is demonstrated through consistent kindness rather than just expressed through words. I mention how Dad showed up for Mom every single day for 35 years, how he learned to cook her favorite foods and wrote her poems and made her feel cherished. I talk about commitment as an action rather than just a feeling. When I look at Elena during the speech, she's smiling at me with tears in her eyes, and I know she understands what I'm really saying. Tunde is holding her hand and looking at her with so much genuine affection that I feel hopeful for them. After the ceremony ends, several guests come up to me and say the speech was beautiful and different from typical wedding speeches about romance. One older couple says it made them think about their own marriage in a new way. Amos finds me near the bar and pulls me aside. He tells me he thinks Dad would be proud of how I honored the complexity of marriage without making it sound simple or easy. He says real love requires work and choice, and not enough people talk about that honestly. Kira hugs me a few minutes later and thanks me for helping Elena develop realistic expectations for her marriage. She says Elena seems happier and more grounded than she did a few months ago, and she credits me with helping her get there. I tell her I just told Elena the truth, but Kira says sometimes that's the hardest and most important thing you can do for someone you love. In the months after the wedding, Elena and I grow closer than we've been in years. We have dinner together every couple of weeks, and we talk about Mom and Dad with more honesty than we ever did when they were alive. We share memories and look at them through our new understanding. Some moments mean more now, like the times we saw Dad going out of his way to make Mom happy even when he was tired or stressed. Other moments mean less, like the grand romantic gestures that we used to think proved their perfect love. We talk about how Dad's choice to commit fully to Mom despite not feeling instant passion shows a kind of character and strength that maybe matters more than passion. We discuss whether Mom knew the truth, and we always come back to the same conclusion, that we'll never know for sure, but it doesn't change the fact that she died happy. Elena tells me one night over dinner that knowing the truth has actually made her appreciate Dad more, not less. She says his choice to love Mom fully, even when his heart wasn't swept away at first, proves real strength. She tells me she used to think love meant constant excitement and butterflies, but now she sees that commitment matters more. She explains how she's been choosing Tunde every morning when she wakes up, deciding to be kind and patient even when she's tired or stressed. She says some days the feelings are intense and wonderful, but other days it's just work, and that's okay because she's building something real. She mentions how Dad showed her that love isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's just showing up and doing the dishes and listening when your partner needs to talk. She tells me she stopped comparing Tunde to some impossible standard and started appreciating who he actually is. She says knowing Dad worked at loving Mom makes the poems and flowers mean more, not less, because they were choices he made every single day. She admits she was putting too much pressure on Tunde to be romantic in specific ways, and now she focuses on how he shows love through his own actions. She thanks me for telling her the truth, even though it was hard, and she says it's made her marriage stronger before it even really started. I drive to the cemetery on a cold morning exactly 1 year after I found those letters in Dad's desk. I park near their graves and walk across the wet grass carrying 2 small flower arrangements. I place 1 bouquet on Mom's headstone and 1 on Dad's, then I sit on the ground between them. I tell Dad I finally understand why he left those letters where someone would find them eventually. I say I think he wanted us to know the truth, so we could build our own relationships on reality instead of fairy tales. I tell him Elena is happy and her marriage is good, and knowing about his choice to love Mom through action has actually helped her. I mention how she's not chasing some perfect romance anymore, she's just building a real partnership with Tunde. I tell Dad I forgive him for the deception, and I'm grateful for what he taught Mom, even if it cost him something. I say I finally feel at peace with my decision to tell Elena, because painful truth turned out to be a better gift than comfortable lies. I sit there for a long time, just feeling the cold air and watching clouds move across the sky. I think about how complicated love actually is, and how simple we try to make it sound.